Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. Today, we will be discussing why the inline-six is the best engine layout ever made. Anyway, let's get into the video. I just want to start by saying the inline-six might just be the most versatile power plant ever created. It's been used in everything, from massive semi-trucks, hauling freight across the country, to light-duty pickups, family sedans, and even luxury cars. Yet despite its incredible range of applications, the inline-six has largely fallen out of fashion, replaced by modern turbocharged 4-cylinders and little compact V6s. But what made the inline-six so special, and why do so many enthusiasts call it the most bulletproof engine layout ever built? The short answer is its engine balance, as it has both primary and secondary engine balance, which means it runs naturally smooth without the need for complicated balance shafts. That smoothness doesn't just apply to the driving experience, but also reduces internal vibration and wear, allowing these engines to run for decades with minimal issues. Now let's go back 50 or 60 years ago, as the inline-six wasn't just an option, it was the base engine for countless American cars and trucks, and that was for good reason. It struck the perfect middle ground between power, torque, and fuel economy. Sure, the V8s of the era had more raw horsepower, but they also came at higher costs and thirstier fuel consumption. The inline-six meanwhile delivered dependable torque right where you needed it at low RPMs, and could keep going for hundreds of thousands of miles. These engines were simple and strong, typically made of cast iron, often using one cylinder head and relying on overhead valve or single overhead cam technology, which were easy to maintain. That simplicity was their secret weapon. Fewer moving parts meant fewer things to break, and the low-end torque reduced stress on the block and crankshaft. From heavy-duty haulers to family cars parked in driveways, the inline-six quietly powered America for most of the 20th century. It was the workhorse that got things done and earned a reputation for being nearly unkillable. Now, I would like to mention some examples, first starting out with the Ford inline-six, as this video wouldn't be complete without mentioning this engine, as it arguably stands out as the most reliable inline-six ever built. First introduced in 1965 for the F-Series trucks, it was essentially a longer stroke version of the earlier 240 cubic inch inline-six, and that extra stroke gave it noticeably more torque and pulling power. In its debut year, the 300 produced around 170 horsepower and 260 foot-pounds of torque. Now those numbers might not sound impressive today, but this engine wasn't built for speed, it was built to last. Its design, dead simple, an overhead valve layout, cast iron block and head, and a single barrel carburetor on the early models. Even after Ford upgraded it with fuel injection in 1987, it still remained one of the easiest engines to work on. But what truly cemented its reputation for indestructibility came decades later during the Cash for Clunkers program, which was introduced in 2009, when thousands of these engines were turned in to be destroyed. Mechanics discovered that the silica-based engine killer, a chemical meant to seize the motor, barely affected the 300. Many of them kept running long after they were supposed to die, proving once and for all just how tough this engine really was. Now, let's move on to the true grandfather of inline-six reliability, the Chevrolet Stovebolt 6. First released in 1929, this engine laid the foundation for nearly every Chevy straight six that followed. The original version was a 192 cubic inch design, making around 46 horsepower, modest by any standard nowadays, but was durable, dependable, and easy to service. Now, as Chevrolet refined the formula, the next generation brought us the 216, 235, and 261 variants. The 235 in particular became a legend. It was standard engine for most Chevrolet passenger cars starting in 1953. It even powered early Corvettes, where it earned the nickname Blue Flame for its distinctive appearance and smooth performance. But what really set the 235 apart was its versatility, as it wasn't just limited to cars. It also found its way into Canadian light-duty GMC trucks, where it proved itself as a reliable workhorse for countless farmers and tradesmen. From sports cars to pickup trucks, the Stovebolt lineage showed that a simple, well-built inline-six could truly do it all. Next up, coming out of Chrysler, we see the Slant 6, also known as a leaning tower of power. Introduced in 1960, this engine got its name from the way it was tilted, which was 30 degrees to the right, which gave engineers more room under the hood. allowing a lower profile design and better airflow through the intake and exhaust. Now the Slant 6 came in 170, 198, and 225 cubic inch versions, with the 225 becoming the most common and well loved. Despite its modest horsepower, usually between 100 and 150 depending on the year, it earned a reputation for being almost unkillable. Taxi fleets, delivery companies, and even police departments relied on these engines because they could take years of abuse and still fire right up every morning. Its cast iron block, simple pushrod valve design, and forgiving carburation made it cheap to maintain and nearly impossible to overheat or destroy. Many owners reported the Slant 6 engines running for 300,000 miles or more without ever needing a rebuild. From the Plymouth Valiant and Dodge Dart to early Dodge D-Series trucks, the Slant 6 powered some of Chrysler's most dependable vehicles. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it was efficient, dependable, and built to last. Moving on, we have one of the most underrated inline sixes in American history, the AMC 232 and 258. Introduced in the mid-1960s, these engines became the backbone of American Motors Corporation's lineup, powering everything from family sedans to rugged Jeeps. The 232 cubic inch version debuted first in 1964, offering smooth power delivery and excellent fuel economy, as a Gremlin at the time was measured to get 30 miles per gallon on the EPA test cycle, although real-world examples put it closer to 20 miles per gallon, which is still solid for the time. Now, a few years later, AMC expanded it into the 258, giving it more low-end torque, exactly what drivers wanted. What made these engines so remarkable was their simplicity and reliability. As all the other inline sixes I previously described, they used cast iron blocks, overhead valves, and a straightforward carburetor setup, which made them easy to maintain even in the harshest conditions. Whether under the hood of a Rambler, a Hornet, or later a Jeep CJ, these inline sixes just kept running. The AMC 258 in particular became legendary for its torque and toughness, and laid the groundwork for one of the most famous straight sixes of all time, the Jeep 4-liter, which brings us to that engine, which was introduced in 1986. It was a direct evolution of the AMC 258, refined and strengthened to handle the demands of modern driving while keeping the rugged simplicity that made its predecessors legendary. The Jeep 4-liter featured a cast iron block and head, along with an overhead valve design and a long stroke that gave it the signature low-end torque Jeep owners love. Depending on the model year, the output ranged from 173 to 190 horsepower and 220 to 235 pound-feet of torque, plenty for crawling up mountains, hauling gear, or surviving decades of off-road punishment. What truly set the 4-liter apart, though, was its reputation for reliability. These engines regularly clocked over 300,000 miles without major work, even when neglected. They were known for starting in freezing temperatures and running smoothly with minimal vibration and shrugging off overheating or abuse that would kill lesser engines. From the XJ to the Wrangler and the Grand Cherokee, the 4-liter became an icon, not because it was powerful, but because it was unstoppable and incredibly reliable. For 2 whole decades, it showed everything that the inline-six stood for: strength, simplicity, and dependability. Now, when Jeep retired it in 2006, it wasn't because it was a bad engine, it's because emissions and fuel economy standards had finally caught up to it. Now, notice how I haven't mentioned any modern inline-sixes up to this point, and there's a good reason for that. Sure, today's versions are reliable in their own right, but they just don't have the same bulletproof nature as their predecessor. The old saying, "they don't make them like they used to," couldn't be more true here. Now, back in the day, engines were built with longevity as the top priority. Today, things are different. Automakers often design with planned obsolescence in mind, making vehicles that encourage you to buy a new one every few years instead of keeping the old one running forever. And that is exactly the reason why you see so many pre-1990s cars and trucks still on the road today, as they just refuse to die. Now, take the BMW N52 for example. It's a relatively modern inline-six that's considered, relatively dependable, but only if you stay on top of every bit of maintenance. Miss an oil change or two and you're asking for trouble. Compare that to the old school engines like the Ford 300s, the Slant 6s, the Jeep 4-liters. Those could skip a few oil changes and get half beaten to death and still fire right up the next morning. The difference comes down to simplicity. The older engines didn't rely on delicate electronics or plastic components. They were overbuilt, understressed, and designed to last a lifetime. And that's something modern engines, no matter how advanced, just can't quite replicate. Even still, I would like to mention a couple modern standouts, such as the Cummins diesels, which are some of the most famous inline-sixes ever. The 5.9-liter 12-valve diesel dropped in the Dodge Rams in 1989 and immediately redefined durability, cast iron block, forged internals, and Bosch mechanical fuel injection, which it made 160 to 215 horsepower, but 400 to 440 pound-feet of torque, and routinely lasted 500,000 miles or more. Some of them are still on the road with over 1 million miles, which truly shows how reliable these engines are. Then came the 5.9 24-valve, adding electronic fuel injection and more power, which was released in 1998. It offered up to 325 horsepower and 610 pound-feet of torque, keeping nearly the same bulletproof reliability as the 12-valve. Now, the modern 6.7-liter Cummins, introduced in 2007, brought emission tech like EGR and DPF, but power climbed past 350 horsepower and 800 pound-feet of torque. Even with all these modern features, these inline-sixes still stay true to their roots. Now, still on the subjects of diesels, I would like to mention the GM 3-liter Duramax turbo inline-six, found in the Chevrolet Silverado 1500 and GMC Sierra 1500, which is a perfect example. It produces 277 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque. Despite being modern and emissions heavy, it's built for durability and efficiency. With an aluminum block, cast iron cylinder liners, and a turbocharged design, it's engineered to handle daily driving, towing, and everything in between, while still maintaining reliability. It shows that even today, a properly designed inline-six can be smooth, powerful, and dependable. Even though it's less powerful than the 6.6 Duramax, it is cheaper to own and still provides good power. Another example is the Mazda 3.3-liter turbo inline-six, found in the models like the CX-90 and CX-70. This engine is smooth, torquey, and built with durability in mind. It comes with modern fuel injection and refinement with the timeless advantages of an inline-six. Mazda designed it to handle long-term use without constant maintenance, proving that the inline-six layout is still relevant today. In its standard form, it makes 280 horsepower and 332 foot-pounds of torque. Now, considering it's a 3.3-liter turbo, that's relatively low, but it prioritizes reliability and smooth power delivery over peak numbers. For those who want more performance, there is a high-output version that bumps it up to 340 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque, giving it much more punch while still keeping the durability and refinement the inline-six is known for. Anyway, let's wrap it up. Looking back from the Chevrolet Stovebolt to the Ford 300 to the Jeep 4-liter, Cummins diesels, and even modern engines like the GM 3-liter and the Mazda 3.3, the inline-six has proven itself time and time again. It's smooth, torquey, versatile, and built to last, whether powering a family sedan, a pickup truck, or a heavy-duty diesel. Even though the inline-six has fallen out of fashion for smaller turbo engines and V6s in many cars, its legacy, durability, simplicity, and effortless torque remains unmatched. These engines moved America, and their influence is still felt in the reliable, refined inline-sixes being built today. The story of the inline-six is one of timeless design and the concept that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like down below, and if you're not already, maybe consider subscribing. Helps out a ton and motivates me to keep making these videos. Anyway, I'll catch y'all in the next one.